Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Shui Xian. Specifically, we're taking a look at the Taiwanese Shui Xian available from whatcha.com. This tea, also known as Narcissus Oolong, is traditionally a yancha. A yancha is traditionally an oolong tea prepared in the Wuyi Mountains in Fujian, China. This tea, however, is made in Taiwan. Specifically, it's made in Mingjiang, Nantao, Taiwan, so that's in central Taiwan. This tea is grown at a 350 meter elevation, and this tea is made with the CG Chun cultivar. This cultivar is also known as the Four Seasons cultivar and is a very popular cultivar to use in Taiwan. It is very resilient and able to be picked multiple times throughout the year, and because of this, it is very commonly used in a lot of teas, not just the Four Seasons Taiwan tea. So now that we have most of the base info out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the tasting of the tea. Now we're going to begin by examining the dry leaf of the tea. Now, in the leaf itself, we can see a lot of dark coffee colored notes, and combined with this we can also see some dark crimson and also some rust notes in there as well. Now, when looking at the leaf, you can see that there's a large presence of twigs in the leaf. Now this is indicative that this tea was actually machine picked instead of hand picked. And looking at the site, we can actually confirm this fact. It states it here in the description that this is actually a machine picked tea. Now let's get into the rest of the tasting. Okay, so now we have our preheated gaiwan here. We're going to add the leaves and describe the smell. So immediately you get the standard yancha mineral sweetness. You get dates and raisins, a little bit of cherry, and you get some vanilla, which is really interesting. But then after that, you do get a little bit of the floral note that you'd expect from a lighter Taiwanese oolong. It's a very interesting mix between yancha and Taiwanese oolong that is kind of unique to something like this, an imitation of a Chinese tea through a Taiwanese lens using a Taiwanese cultivar. Okay, now we're going to give a rinse and describe the smell of the wet leaves. So the wet leaf color here is a lot darker, with the rust becoming more of a dried fruit color. Like, it looks like the color of a date, with a little bit of highlight, a little bit of gold highlight in there. Now for the first infusion, I think for this we're going to go with 15 seconds for the first infusion. So first we're going to take a look at the color of the brew. You get a really nice light gold color here, and let's give this a smell. Okay, you get more of the wet leaf, the roasted notes coming through a lot. The prints and dates tend to hide under the smell now, with hints of orchids throughout, and that tiniest bit of vanilla that kind of blends with the orchids. So the first big flavor that you get is you get the traditional yancha roasted kind of mineral flavor that's very sweet. There's a little bit of plums, and so you get a lot of roasted veggies under there. You get a lot of roasted broccoli and green beans, a very savory note, and then right at the end you get the traditional Taiwanese floral kind of orchid taste. For being a relatively cheap and machine picked tea, you do get a good bit of complexity to it. The mouthfeel is relatively neutral. You do get a tiny bit of drying, but not that much, and it is a little bit thick, not incredibly thick, not like a white tea, but it is still a little bit thick. Overall, it is very pleasant. And I'm noticing here, it's very subtle right now, you get a tiny bit of astringency right on the tip of the tongue that almost feels like sour, but not quite. It's very hard to describe, but you get it in oolongs especially. It's not really sour, it's just a bit of astringency right at the tip of the tongue. So we're going to give this another infusion and see how the taste changes. So now we have the second infusion here. Those roasted notes really come out a lot stronger here in the second infusion. And on top of that, you get a spicy note to it. And it's just a very savory with a little bit of like warming spice. The sweetness hasn't fully gone away. There is a little bit of that dried fruits, those dates, those prunes a little bit. While there's still that little bit of sweetness there, it is fading in terms of a more savory set of flavors. And that astringency right at the tip of the tongue really kind of helps finish that off and balance it out. Now let's give this third infusion a taste. There's a lot more of that bourbon vanilla kind of note in this infusion. You get the same roasted note, but then you also get this vanilla note, which is kind of hidden away since really early on. So it's interesting to smell it here again. And that vanilla note is more present here now too as well. The roasted vegetables have subsided a little bit. That tiny bit of astringency. Not enough to really call it an astringent tea. It's really not. It's just a tiny amount. The savory note is still there, but there's a lot more, not necessarily sweet, but reminiscent of sweet notes here. You do get the vanilla note. You do get kind of a dried blueberry note here, which is very interesting, especially since you can't really pick it up anywhere else. So you get this blueberry note here with the vanilla. It becomes a much more sweet reminiscent tea. You don't really get any of the sweetness of those flavors necessarily. The sweetness you get is more coming from the roasted mineral flavor. So yeah, so this tea is currently on sale on Whatcha's site for $5.50 US-ish for 50 grams, which is a great price, and I highly recommend this tea. While it might not be prestigious or especially high grade in terms of picking, it does have a lot of complexity. This tea is really great. It's really interesting seeing how this is Taiwanese take on a traditionally Chinese tea changes the flavors. You do get brighter notes that pop up every so often. The orchid notes kind of weave through. Sometimes they're there in infusion, sometimes they aren't. So I think in conclusion, I'd have to say I really highly recommend this tea, especially for the price point. It might not be the fanciest tea, but it is delicious, it is complex, and it's just a great buy overall. So that wraps up this review. If you'd like to see me take a look at any other specific teas, please leave a comment down below. I have a few videos planned, but I'd really like to hear what you all think I should do. Please leave a like if you like this video. Please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell. Those both really help my channel. That's all for this video. See you next time.